Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's virtual meeting of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. I'm Jim Roosevelt from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and along with my good friend Lorraine Miller from the great state of Texas, we serve as co-chairs of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. And I'm going to ask Lorraine just to say hi so that I know you can hear me. She's waving. Okay, yeah. Got it. Thanks. We appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today. Lorraine and I hope that you are all doing well and are staying safe and healthy. We look forward to the time when we can conduct these meetings in person, which we really hope will be soon. In the meantime, we appreciate your participation today and all that you do to make sure our party continues to function during these unprecedented times. As a reminder, this is an official meeting of the committee, so we are live streaming these proceedings on the Democratic National Committee's YouTube channel so that we can have an official record of our deliberations. Please now join me in reciting the declaration, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lorraine, now I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you, kinda. And I hope everyone is doing well. The next item on our agenda is a call to call the roll of the RBC members who are participating in our call today. At this time, I will ask Liz Merripin, the Assistant Director of Party Affairs Office, to call the roll. Liz?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Mr. Berman. I see Mr. Berman will note your attendance.
He's waving.
Yes.
Now he's unmuted.
Thank you.
There you go.
Ms. Blanco will not be joining us today and has identified her proxy as Ms. Weingarten. Ms. Brazil.
Present.
Mr. Brennan.
Hello.
Miss Cardona.
Present.
Ms. Daughtry will not be joining us today and has identified her proxy as Ms. Moore. Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Mr. Ickes. Ms. Kmark will not be joining us today and has identified her proxy as Co-Chair Roosevelt. Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Liu will not be joining us today and has identified his proxy as Ms. Swecker. Mr. Martin will not be joining us today and has identified his proxy as Ms. Lewis. Ms. Martinez.
Presente.
Mr. McDonald.
All right, here.
Ms. Moore.
Here.
Ms. Mount.
Here.
Mr. Nutter. Mr. Ray.
Here.
Ms. Ruiz will not join us today. Mr. Saunders will not be joining us today. Mr. Spite.
Here.
Ms. Swecker.
I'm here.
And Ms. Weingarten. Okay. Thank you, Chairwoman. I believe we've noted everyone in attendance.
Great. Thank you, Liz. So we do have a quorum. A quorum is consisted of 40% of the members present in person or by proxy. This video meeting is an official meeting of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and therefore the attendance requirements in the DNC's bylaws do apply. However, as you know, this special meeting and our meeting prior to the DNC meeting are the two final meetings of this particular Rules and Bylaws Committee. At the DNC meeting, the members will vote on Chair Harrison's appointments to the standing committees. Therefore, I will forego our usual notes about missing 3 consecutive meetings or registering a proxy. Before we move on with our business today, I want to take just a moment, a personal privilege to acknowledge a few folks. Guys, we have been very fortunate to have Rick Broylan serving as our interim director of the Party Affairs and Delegate Selection Office. You will not know how important that is, and we haven't missed a beat as a committee because of Rick's diligence. Rick was the first director of the office, and his knowledge and experience have been so invaluable to us. When our beloved Patrice Taylor accepted a position in the administration, Rick moved from his advisory role into the interim director position. I know Rick is looking forward to the DNC hiring a new director of the PADS office so he can move back to his part-time consulting role. And it is my understanding that an announcement of the new director will be coming in the very near future. So Rick, we really, really thank you for stepping up and being the Director General that you are. We also want to say a big thank you to Liz Maripin, the Assistant Director of Party Affairs Office. I mean, Liz called the roll for us, and Milan Robinson, the Assistant Director of the Leadership Office. And I understand that the PAD staff has been most ably assisted by some outstanding interns. We had 4, two of them were summer interns, Nicola and Niles, and then we have 2 fall interns. Spencer is one of them that hasn't quite come aboard, but we appreciate you, everything you do. Thanks much. In addition, we're also joined by members of the DNC staff, our DNC counsel, Graham Wilson and Andrea Levin, and our parliamentarian, Helen McFadden. Guys, we appreciate each of you for being here to help make sure our meeting runs smoothly. Before we move into the business of the meeting, I want to remind you that members will be muted unless they are recognized to speak, at which point they will be introduced and unmuted by the staff. If a member would like to be recognized for comments or questions, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or send a chat to Liz. That will help us with staff assistance to create a queue that we'll use to call on each member. When it's your turn to speak, you will be announced and unmuted. As always, we will do our best to call on each of you in the order that you seek recognition, but please be patient with us. If you have any questions or comments before we get started, please submit them in the chat to Liz now or raise your hand in Zoom, and staff will help us make sure you're recognized. So we want to take a quick moment here to see if there are any questions before we get started. Any questions? Okay, groovy smoothie. So we're going now to our introduction of our voting system presentation. And then this is, I think, the meat of our meeting today. To help give context to the rules of procedure that we are reviewing at this meeting, we want to first take a couple of minutes to review how voting will work at the DNC meeting. Today, we are fortunate to have Andrew Benz with us. Andrew has worked in technology for over 15 years and has played a key role in making sure every national convention since 2004 has run smoothly and efficiently. For the 2016 convention, he was the Chief Information Officer, and for the 2020 convention, he was the Chief Operating Officer. In 2020, Andrew put together the voting systems for the standing committees and the national convention. As we know, that is quite a task, a difficult task, especially because all of our planning had to be changed because of COVID-19. He made sure that all of it worked seamlessly. Andrew's company is providing the technology support for today's meeting. They will also be running the Zoom meeting technologies for the upcoming standing committees meeting and the full DNC meeting. Andrew, we appreciate you joining us today and give us an overview of how the voting process will work for the upcoming DNC meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Benz.
Thank you, Lorraine. Happy to be here with you all today. As you all are aware, with your work at the local, state, and national level, we're still adjusting policies and procedures to conduct party business during the pandemic, while keeping all of our members and the working individuals who support our meetings safe, whether they're our members, our staffs, or the frontline service workers at meeting and convention venues. Just as many of these precinct, ward, town, city, county, and state meetings and conventions have used electronic voting to conduct business, the upcoming DNC meeting will have similar requirements due to the pandemic. We're taking the same detailed approach and thoughtful approach to this meeting as we did at the national convention last summer. While the process will differ a little bit, our resolve to find a solution that is inclusive, safe, and works for everybody remains the same. And with that, I'll dive right in to go over the process. The voting process is twofold for the meeting. We have DNC member votes, and we have DNC member proxy votes. First, for the member votes, we're establishing a secure online voting system that each DNC member will have access to during the meeting to cast their votes. The member will use their existing email address and a unique PIN that will be sent to them prior to the meeting to access the site. As votes are announced during the meeting, members will see the vote appear on the platform, and they can enter and submit their vote for each occurrence. In a situation where an individual is having trouble with the online system or wishes to cast their vote over the phone, there'll be a phone number to do so that'll be staffed. The DNC member will be verified over the phone and their vote recorded. Second, for proxy votes. If a member wishes to proxy their vote to another member, they must enter their information and the proxy holder's information into an online form that is submitted to the Office of the Secretary. The Office of the Secretary verifies that information, alerts the original member and the proxy holder that the proxy holder may now proxy vote for the original member, and issues the proxy holder an additional voting PIN. The proxy vote is entered in the same fashion as a standard vote through either the online platform or via phone. Per the rules of procedure, it's requested that proxies be given to the Office of the Secretary prior to the meeting, but they may be given at any time up until the vote, just not during the vote. We've endeavored to keep the process as simple and straightforward as possible, with the ability to vote online or via phone, so we have a successful and a safe DNC meeting. And with that, I'll hand it back to Lorraine. Lorraine?
Okay, groovy. So members, if you have questions of Andrew, about the voting system, please raise your hand via Zoom or send your question via the chat to Liz. We'll do our best to call on you in the order that you seek recognition. Thank you, Andrew. That was quite informative. So, Liz, do we have any questions from our members right now?
Chairwoman, we do not.
That's good. So it was clear, clean, and precise. And the assumption is that all the members are pretty satisfied and understand how this process will work. Thank you again, Andrew, for your presentation. If there are no questions, Jim, toss it back to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Now that we have an understanding of the basics of how the voting system will operate at the DNC meeting itself, let's move to the consideration of the proposed rules of procedure. These rules are based on the rules of procedure that were essentially used since 1989 for electing the DNC and executive committee members at large. However, because our upcoming meeting will be conducted by video conference, and because members will, as always, be voting on a number of matters during the meeting, including reports of the standing committees, we've had to make some adjustments. As well, the revised rules also reflect the changes made by the DNC to the equal division requirements in the charter. These proposed rules include language to ensure that the election of our at-large members allows for the election of non-binary members, while continuing to require the equal division of male and female members as practicable. In other words, if non-binary members are among the 75 candidates who receive the most votes, they will be elected, and the remaining positions will be divided among the male and female candidates with a variance of not more than one. As Andrew noted, a difference between the convention and our national committee is that the DNC allows votes by proxy. These proposed rules allow the secretary to work with the technology team to have a system in place to allow members to also cast a proxy vote if they hold another member's proxy. So we just did that to complicate things for the technology people beyond the convention even. No, that's what we're required to do. Okay. Because we cannot have voice votes or a show of hands as we would at an in-person meeting, we will use the electronic voting system for all votes. This essentially means that each time members vote, it will be as if we are conducting a roll call vote. However, because it will be done electronically, we expect the amount of time needed for each vote to be minimal, unlike if we were doing a roll call vote at an in-person meeting. And at our in-person meetings, when a member wants to make a comment, give remarks, or raise a point of order, they usually step up to the microphone in front of the podium to seek recognition by the chair. In our video conferencing format, the proposed rules provide for a member to send a message in the chat to the meeting host. This will allow the chair to recognize members in the order they have contacted the host, or by the order of priority of why they wish to be recognized in accordance with parliamentary procedure. As we get into our discussion of the proposed rules of procedure, I'll remind you that if you would like to be recognized for comments or questions, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or send a note in the chat to Liz. Staff will help us create a queue that we will use to call on each member. When it is your turn to speak, you will be announced and unmuted. We will do our best to call on everyone in the order you seek recognition. So with that brief overview and reminder, I'd like to ask for a motion for the Rules and Bylaws Committee to recommend proposed rules and procedure for approval by the DNC at its full meeting. and to open the floor for discussion. Is there a motion? Mr. Ray?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the rules of procedure as presented.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I thought you were going to call on me. I second that motion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weingarten. For having a motion, and now that we have a motion and a second, we'll move into discussion. For our discussion, we're going to show the proposed rules of procedure. So we're all literally working off the same page. Assisting us with viewing the documents is Nikita Leosaliva, an intern in the DNC Party Affairs Office. Thank you, Nikita. Starting off our review of the document, you will see it already includes some suggested edits. These are changes suggested by David McDonald to help clarify the language. Lorraine and I have reviewed David's suggestions and agree with them, and we would like David to walk through his edits with you. I'm going to call on David McDonald now. There you go. You're muted, David. Now you're unmuted.
I was sending inconsistent signals, probably not for the first time in my life, to the technical people. By way of background, perhaps more for people who may be viewing this meeting rather than individual members, one of the essence of the change that we made to equal division was to do two things. One, to be clear that you did not have to be a male or female in order to be elected to a position at the DNC, but on the other hand, to not require the election of any set number of non-binary individuals, because we did not have adequate data to work with to make those kinds of decisions. When I went through these rules, the staff putting them together from the previous ones did a terrific job of catching most of the places where we were converting from our prior language, where we assumed that every candidate would be either a male or a female, and our current situation. But there were a couple of places where it potentially could be crisper, or somebody reading it cold who doesn't have all of our background might have assumed that we were saying something other than what we intended. And that's why I suggested these changes. The very first change in paragraph 1A2, the existing sentence says a slate of nominees may have no more than half of its candidates of the same gender. As a purely technical matter, if you have 75 candidates for at-large and you assume that they're either male or female, one gender is going to have more than half of the people. Sorry for the math background. Normally that wouldn't be, in past times, that would not have necessarily been a big deal, but it could be read to imply that you must elect at least one non-binary in order to keep the males or females from having more than half. Rather than the existing sentence, I suggested instead that we insert a sentence that says all slates must be equally divided, which requires our existing standard that there be no more than a variance of one between self-identified males and females. The second, Jim, did you want to do these one at a time, or?
No, let's go right on through them, David.
Okay.
Then we'll take questions and comments on both the amendments and the whole set of rules.
Yeah, if you can sort of scroll up the screen, and I'll scroll up mine so I can see where I'm going ahead of time. The rest of the changes are probably a little bit less substantive and a little bit more picky, but if the next change is proposed change is in section 1C1, we've written an assumption into the existing rules that any tie will be in the 75th position. I'm not sure that that's actually correct, given that we could have 3 or 4 people who have tied votes and they may be of 3 different genders, and we don't know for sure which way it would go. So I substituted a more interpretable language of a material tie for a position and left out specifying which numerical position it is. And then in section 1C2, the existing language could be read by somebody unfamiliar with our procedures as requiring that a DNC member vote for either a male or a female, but have to divide the votes equally. Instead, I've changed the language slightly to make it clear that if a member votes for males and females, they must vote for them as equally as practicable, but doesn't assume that they are necessarily voting for only 2 genders. In section 1C3, the existing language said, assumes that there will be males and females, but says, and will also list any gender non-binary candidates. I don't know whether somebody would take offense of that or not, but I have certainly been educated across the last few years in particular that my understanding of what will be offensive to somebody else who's of a different background is less than complete. And so I have suggested that perhaps rather than assuming there might not be any gender non-binary candidates, we simply change it to a more neutral, indicate male, female, and gender non-binary candidates as appropriate. Then in section 2, there are proposed changes that are largely the same substance as the changes that were made in connection with the at-large elections, although the wording is sometimes slightly different. Excuse me. The first of them deletes section B1 altogether because it's actually a bit redundant of section C3, which specifies how the 11 members will be elected. And the section C3 does not have the issue of referring only to women and men.
And I'm just going to point out here that if we go forward with this amendment, we will be renumbering all these sections. Okay.
The proposed changes in section C1 and C2 are simply parallel to the same language that existed above. I believe that is all of the changes on this subject that I suggested, and I'm about to yield the microphone, but Jim, during the course of the technical presentation, I did have one question that I want to ask. I don't want to take it up now because I don't want to hold up people talking about this subject, but later on when you're done, I would like to come back and ask a question about proxy voting.
Liz, would you make a note of that, please?
Yes, Chair, Co-Chair.
And remind me, okay, or Lorraine. All right, thank you very much for those explanations, David. So now we've come to the time for discussion of the rules as a whole and the proposed amendments. If you have any items of discussion or any questions or comments, please either raise your hand or put it in the chat function. And Liz, I'm going to ask you to let me know if we have anyone raising their hand or requesting by chat to be recognized.
At this time, Chairman, I do not see any questions or notes in the chat.
All right, I'm going to call one final time for questions or comments or discussion. Wait about half a minute here and then ask you to confirm again, Liz, that you have nothing in the queue. Liz, do you have any questions or comments?
Chairman, there are no questions or raised hands at this time.
Okay. So we need a motion first to adopt David's amendments. David, would you like to make that motion?
I would, and I so move.
And
There a second?
Jason, would you like to second that motion? And we have,
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
thank you very much. Since we had no discussion, I'll move directly to a vote. And what I'm going to do is ask, is there any objection to the motion to adopt David's amendments? If you object, please use the raise your hand feature or a message in the chat. Liz, do we have anyone raising their hand?
No, Chairman, we do not.
So seeing no objection, the motion for the amendments is approved. Now we will move to a vote on the rules as a whole. Is there any objection to them? Hold on, Helen, do I need a motion to adopt the rules as a whole? As amended.
You have already received that motion, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
that's right. That was Mr. Ray's motion. Thank you. All right. Now, I think maybe David McDonald may have raised his hand.
Yes, Chairman,
Yes.
have a hand raised.
I did. Jim, I just wanted to ask my question about the rules before we adopted them.
All right.
In Andrew's explanation of the voting, he indicated that a proxy request would be accepted at any time up until voting occurred. The way that our rule is written on proxy voting, it seems to be to create a situation in which if you are not coming to the meeting, you must submit your proxy request by 5 o'clock the night before. And you can only give a proxy on the day of the meeting if you are at the meeting, because the phrase says, if you must leave the meeting, you're able to give a proxy to the secretary. And it kind of creates a gap that that's a little inconsistent with Andrew's high-level explanation. If we intend to let people decide the morning of the meeting that they're unable to come and submit a proxy, then we probably ought to change the rule. And I'm unwilling to propose a change without some input from the Secretary's office as to what the impact of allowing morning submission of that kind would be. And that's all my comments.
So before we call on the Secretary, let me just mention, I believe this timetable in days of in-person meetings was intentional. It really went to the so that the Secretary's office didn't miss something that came in the day of the meeting. Whether that still applies now that we're doing this all electronically, let me turn to Secretary Ray and ask how he feels about this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was something that we had put in place at previous in-person meetings, particularly after my first meeting. One of the things that we found was that we had individuals sending proxies right up until the start of it. And by the time staff actually had a chance to process that and send it over to a caucus or council or the general session, the meeting was underway and it became burdensome in part because things were already progressing. So we started this process in order to, one, provide the staff time needed to facilitate, and then particularly in this meeting to also allow and notify the proxy holder that they're carrying a proxy for someone else. And in the case where someone, because we limit it to only one proxy, should someone have two proxies, it also provides an opportunity prior to the start of the meeting to transfer that proxy over. We purposely kind of put this language in that way to be consistent with how we've operated in the past, but also to provide the administrative time needed in order to facilitate the execution of that proxy.
So, Jason, are you arguing that we should leave the rules as proposed?
I would recommend that. That would be our office's recommendation.
David, do you want to respond to that, or are you satisfied?
Yeah, I just want to make clear, I was not necessarily interested in changing the rule as proposed. I was more concerned about DNC members who might be listening to this discussion and not be as much rules geeks as we are to tuned out right after the explanation of how the voting would work. So just wanted to be sure we were clear on what the situation was.
Okay, so I think we've clarified both the function and the purpose.
And we'll be sure, Mr. Chair, as we continue with our 7-day notice and other notice to members, to be very clear about deadlines on that and how they can submit and participate that way. So we'll have many more communications going out to make sure that it's very clear. So thank you, David, for raising that.
So Liz, let me ask you once more to confirm whether there is any objection to the motion.
There are no objections.
All right, so seeing no objection, the motion to adopt the rules as amended is approved by the RBC, and they will be sent to the members in the 7-day mailing. Good job, everybody.
Great.
Lorraine?
Members, thank you, Jim. Members, we appreciate your cooperation. This has been a pretty smooth meeting today. We've come to the end of our agenda for today's special Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting. Jim and I really want to thank you again for your time and your invaluable insight you've given to this very important process. And David McDonald, we always appreciate you. And we could not do this work without each of you. Your time and your thoughts and your insight is important. As announced last night in the Secretary's 14-day mailing to members, the Rules and Bylaws Committee will meet at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, October 8th. Let me say that again, because there had been some confusion. I even had it. The Rules and Bylaws Committee will meet at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, October 8th. At that meeting, we will review the 5 charter and bylaws amendments that have been proposed for consideration. Before we go, we want to check again to make sure there are any questions that haven't been answered. If you have a question, again, please raise your hand in the Zoom feature or send a chat to Liz. And if you do that right now, that will help us facilitate trying to recognize any member that has a question or a concern that you want to raise. Liz, do you see any activity in the chat?
We do not have any questions at this time, Chairwoman.
Okay. Calling one more time for questions or concerns. Seeing none. I want to again express the appreciation. You just don't know how much we appreciate what everyone is doing on behalf of Jim and I and the staff and all of you for your time and participation with this committee. As we prepare for our next RBC meeting on October 8th and the full DNC meeting on October 9th, feel free to let us know if you have any additional thoughts or ideas on the topics we're discussing. We pray God's continued blessing on each of you. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Chairwoman, also in addition, I'm so sorry. We have a hand raised by member Ms. Donna Brazil.
Ms. DB?
You are known when I gave my opening comments, but I just want to make sure, are we the class of 2020? Because after Friday, October 8th at 2 p.m., we will be proposing through the election that will take place on Saturday, the class of 2024, right? So we're the 2020 class. We are the RBC class of 2020. I just wanted to make sure that we understand who we are. This is next on Friday the 8th. That's our expiration date.
Right.
That is true.
Yeah.
Although we actually stay in office until the end of the full DNC meeting, because that's when our successors are elected.
Thank you.
So we got a one-day repeat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Class
Any
of
other questions, Liz? What? Go ahead, Donna. Okay. Liz, any other questions in the queue?
No further questions at this time.
No questions, comments? Okay. If all of us are on like minds, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Unless we want to stay for the rest of the afternoon.
So move.
Is there a second?
I see Donna seconding.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Okay. Seeing and hearing no objection, our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much. And everyone, have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you all very much.